Week 2, day 1 in your workbook, it's Abram and the covenant. All right, so picking up in Genesis chapter 11, in the town of Ur is a man named Terah. Terah packs up his family and heads towards the region of Canaan. Now, he followed the ancient trade highway, which followed the water source, and it would be sort of like if we went from Florida to California by way of Minnesota. All right, so along the way, they stopped in Haran, which in my silly example would be like stopping up in Minnesota, and Terah dies there, and his son's story begins. His son is Abraham, but at this point, his son is still known as Abram. All right, so picking up at chapter 12, this is a pivotal passage in the Old Testament. So, verse 1, the Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Huge promise, huge promise. And the next three words are, so Abram went. All right, so Abram leaves Haran and heads down to Canaan. Now he's got his wife and his nephew Lot with him. Once they arrive in Canaan, the Lord appears to Abram and says, all of this land I'm going to give to you and your descendants. And that's why it's called the Promised Land, because God promised to give it to Abram and his descendants. All right, so Abram relocates for a time down to Egypt because of a famine that was all in the region. But in chapter 13, he and Lot are coming back into Canaan. So he and Lot at this point have a lot of livestock. They're very, very wealthy, and the herders start fighting among each other, probably for watering holes. And so Abram decides it's time for he and Lot to split up, and he lets Lot pick. He says, you pick where you want to go, and Lot picks to the east towards the Jordan, and he settles near Sodom, which was not a good choice for Lot. Sodom was very wicked, and a couple of chapters later, God destroys Sodom and Gomorrah, and Lot and his two daughters survive, but the wife ends up a pile of salt on the ground. So back to Abram, starting with chapter 15. This is hugely important, hugely important. So the Lord appeared, they're back in Canaan, the Lord appears to Abram and tells him he's going to have a son. And then he takes him outside and says, look up at the sky and count the stars if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. Okay, at this point, Abram has no children, and he's a very old man. So I'm sure this was a hard promise to wrap his mind around, but God means it. God's real serious about this. And so he's going to bind this promise as a covenant. All right. So in ancient times, you bound legally a covenant with a ceremonial sacrifice. And so Abram prepares the animals for sacrifice, and then God causes him to fall into a very deep sleep. And God alone passes between the animal parts in the form of a smoking fire pot. And he does this all by himself to make sure that we understand that it's a one-way promise. Essentially, he is binding himself to bless Abraham forever and all of his descendants. And so we're going to stop here, and we'll pick up tomorrow, find out how we're getting those offspring.